Welcome to episode 712 of the Barcelona podcast, brought to you by the Blue Wire Podcast Network. I am Dan Hilton, and we are just about 4 hours away, at time of recording at least, from the kickoff of the Liga season. Yesterday, I did the Barca preview stuff, went deep with Ivar. Appreciate him coming on to go over all the Barca predictions for the season. But today, we're taking a larger scope because we've got to give some attention to the rest of the Liga. Yes, there are 19 other teams that do play in the same league and could win the Liga as Barcelona. We'll do the Champions League stuff as that comes. Copa del Rey, of course, for the new year, but all the attention is on the Liga for this weekend. And to help me do that is your friend and mine, it's Ruri Barlow. Ruri, thank you so much, as always, for taking the time to talk to me. That could have, I think on a day like this, better been used on refreshing the page to see which Liga players are actually registered this weekend and getting all your previews ready. But somehow I've been reading all your stuff on Football España. And when I say all, I mean as much as I can actually managed to get my eyes onto, because there's just so much going on in the league. And again, I appreciate so much that you took the time to do this on this day of all days.
Yeah, no problem at all. It's always a delight to be on, Dan. I would direct people to our season preview, which is lengthy, and I thought I would be able to bash out very quickly, but many hours later, I published it earlier this week, and it is relatively comprehensive. I'd say I think we touched on at least all 20 teams. So yes, it's been a busy week, but it is exciting that we're going to get back to some football finally instead of just transfer rumors, which can be exciting, but at times can go on, as you know, Dan.
Yeah, well, I'd say for Ruri, your and my conversations over these years, they haven't necessarily had the hottest of takes or been the fieriest of things. So let's actually start with the hot take stuff nice and early. I'll ask you straight up. That's what people want to hear. Who are your top four in the Liga this season, and in what order?
My top four this season is going to be, and yes, pinch yourselves. I'm sorry for this Barcelona fans, but Real Madrid to win La Liga is my prediction. Barcelona to come second, Atleti third, and Betis will finally make the top four under Manuel Pellegrini this season. That's my hot take.
I think the hottest part of that take. Now, obviously, the people in my comments on social media are going to yell at you for the Real Madrid Barcelona stuff. Merit it, and we can discuss that as we talk about Real Madrid. But the Real Betis point is the one that actually surprises me, because I don't see how Athletic Club or Villarreal don't finish fourth. As I was creating this preview for our conversation, let's put a pin in that. We're going to start with Real Madrid, and we'll break down some of the top teams, and we'll go down to the bottom of the table. But I want to put a pin in that, yes, because Real Betis being the team that you think is going to finish fourth is the real surprise for me. But it does tell me the faith that you, or continued faith, I should say, that you have in Manuel Pellegrini. So let's do Real Madrid first. So yes, they've added Dean Huijsen, Alvaro Carreras, Franco Mastantuono, and Trent Alexander-Arnold. They lost Luka Modric, and will be losing Rodri for 90 mil or something, question mark. Who knows what that's going to happen there. But to me, the biggest signing, if you want to call him that, for Real Madrid is Xabi Alonso. And he, to me, if you make an argument as to why Real Madrid is going to win Liga this season, it would be the new manager bump that you get from Xabi Alonso. And he might be, that being Xabi Alonso, having just won the league 3 seasons on now with Bayer Leverkusen, he might be better prepared for La Liga, or the long, the long week by week thing, as opposed to Ancelotti, who, Ancelotti was all about, hey, preparing our guys for the spring, let's win the Champions League. I'm not saying that Xavi can't do all that, or Real Madrid fans have hopes for that treble in his first season, but I think Xabi Alonso could add an X factor to the Liga title race. But I still think he has a lot of work to do. I still think he has a lot of work to get the best of the names that he has. Because yes, obviously on paper, the names are going to win the Liga. But my other fear for Real Madrid is, and not that there's many Real Madrid fans listening, I still don't see that controller profile. Of all the players that they brought in, yes, left back, of course. Like, to bring in Carreras, what a huge upgrade there. And Dean Huijsen, you could already see the quality to be able to play out of the back. And that just gives Real Madrid a breath of fresh air in the Liga, a moment to breathe on the ball from the back that they just haven't had in recent seasons. I'd say since Sergio Ramos left. They haven't really had that calm. But in the middle of the park, still, especially losing Modric now, where's the pausa? Where's that moment that midfield is going to take a moment to breathe in the Liga? I'm not sure what the answer to that is. So I don't know. Real Madrid, I'm quite interested to hear what you have to say.
Yeah, no, I agree with a lot of what you said there. And I personally do think they lack that controlling midfielder as well, somebody to kind of set the tempo, to kind of control how the game goes. But I think for me, where Real Madrid kind of kept coming up short, and I know they got beaten by Barcelona 4 times last season, but where they kept coming up short last season was against those kind of smaller teams that would sit deep, and they couldn't really find a way to unpick them because I think this was Ancelotti's fourth year last year, and fourth year for there's about 1% of managers make it to a fourth year, and fewer still that kind of make it beyond that, and it's still kind of going well. So I think the message was getting tired. I also think the balance between Ancelotti trying to get the best out of his kind of individual superstar talents, which is what he does best, and kind of having a blueprint, a set kind of team that kind of works in a determined fashion, had kind of gone too far. And I think Alonso, as you say, will redress that. I think he'll make them more consistent, and I think he'll give them better answers to face those teams in the kind of middle half of La Liga that really just make life difficult for you, even if you win the game. So I think that will be a big plus for him. I think he will give them more answers to break down those deeper line defenses. I think he comes in with a bit more carte blanche authority to kind of say to Vinicius and Mbappe, "This is what you're doing, or you're going to the bench." That kind of thing. I think at the very least he will be given that at the start, and then he obviously has to kind of earn that respect, and the results obviously determine where that respect goes from that point onwards. But I think Alonso will give them quite a lot as well. Regarding that controlling midfielder, this is my big doubt about Real Madrid is where their ceiling is this season because I don't quite know how they're going to fare in the Champions League. I'd say they're less likely to win the Champions League not under Ancelotti, but more likely to win La Liga under Alonso. And I think that controlling midfielder, you get bits of that can be helped out by House. And as you say, I think Trent Alexander-Arnold will also play a role in kind of directing play, making switches when it needs to be switched, and kind of stretching the game a little bit for Real Madrid. He'll be quite important in that kind of right-hand side, I think. So I think you'll get bits of this. Goulet and Mastantuono as well will also try and get on the ball. And against the majority of teams in La Liga, say for a couple of teams, Barcelona, Atleti maybe, that will probably be enough in terms of that. When you come up against that top opposition, I do think that could kind of really work against them and cause them issues. But yeah, I think we're going to get a more consistent Real Madrid, a Real Madrid that has kind of more solutions, and a Real Madrid that kind of looks more like a top modern football team. And I think that was Ancelotti's strength in many ways, was that he zagged when everyone else was zigging. I mean, some people will remember playing Rodrigo and Vinicius on the same wing against Manchester City, but Alonso will make them into a much more kind of solidly formed side, and that's what you should expect to see from them.
Why, for me, the name that jumps out is Chouamani this season for Alonso because I could find two very different options for his season, and that one is that we're talking about him in the glorified air that we thought we would be even 2 years ago, or he's completely out of the team and going to be sold in next summer. I think those are two very different versions of Chouamani this year because I think Alonso's going to need him to be essential, and if he's not, then that means he's not doing the right things to keep his spot in the team. That would be my hot take on Chouamani there. Let's transition to the other major club in the capital, Atletico Madrid, of course. So they have added Alex Baena from Villarreal, the center back, David Hansko from Feyenoord, the defensive midfielder Johnny Cardoso from Real Betis, attacker Giacomo Raspadori from Napoli, attacking midfielder Thiago Almada from Botafogo, Matteo Ruggeri from Atalanta, and Mark Pubi from Ameria. I do love individual names. I love many of those players. But here's my question for Diego Simeone, because you said 4 years is a lot. Now, Diego Simeone has got a few more years than four under his belt, and I'm not sure how all of those names that I just said to you fit together. And I also don't know how many of those names outside of Baena really raise that ceiling for them that much. Like I said, I individually am very excited about so many of the names that Atletico Madrid brought in. And I think they have refreshed their squad in a really good way, a squad that clearly looked like it need refreshing. The concern is with all of those new names, are they able to raise their ceiling with those players that are brought in? Because again, I look at Raspadori and Almada together, for example, and Baena, and I'm like, I've seen all those players individually. I've seen them in their teams. And I watch Almada a lot with Atlanta United here, and I go, I don't know how those guys are on the field at the same time. And then I add Antoine Griezmann to that, and I was like, aren't all four of those guys generally most comfortable in the exact same, like 10 by 10 little box in the middle of the field on the field? I'm not getting it. And what I will say is, if it does happen and it does click, that's going to be a ton of fun. But yeah, I don't know. I'm skeptical on Atletico Madrid, at least this season, under Simeone with this group, being able to, I'd say, push closer to the top. Because, yeah, there were moments in the table last season, but they did fall off over the course of 38 matches. And I think there's going to be top two this year with Atletico behind.
Yeah, I think Atleti, for me, they'll get to April. They got to March last year and then it all kind of collapsed in on them. And I think they'll get to April this year, but they're still going to be struggling to compete. More so than anything, because I think Barcelona and Real Madrid will both put up higher points totals than they did last year. I think, as I was saying, Alonso will be more consistent. I think Flick's side won't have that kind of drop off in November or October, and it won't be quite so dramatic as it was the last season. So I think that will kind of play into it as much as anything Atleti are doing. As you say, I think Bayern is the only one that really raises their ceiling. I think Cardoso does, but for different reasons, because he's a profile that they've not really had yet. So I think he comes into their midfield and makes them a lot more solid and a lot harder to break down. So I think that's a big plus for them. But in terms of kind of if you were to put Cardoso up against kind of the Chouameni or De Jong or Casado or whatever, I don't think he makes a huge difference in that kind of sense.
Mm-hmm.
And I think for Atleti, yeah, there's a lot of players in there that, on the face of it, on their own, look like really good signings. But how much of that kind of really raises the level of the side, and it kind of goes to show you just how I feel like every season we say Atleti are in such big need of kind of a rebuild in some senses when you see the players that leave. I mean, Matteo Ruggeri has come in and by all accounts wasn't a starting left back last season for Atalanta, and he's coming in, but he's probably still perhaps an improvement on Javi Galan, with all due respect to who I quite like, but still. And again, yeah, Cardoso, Baena, I think those two will go straight into the starting lineup. Anchko probably goes in as well. But how many of them can make a real difference and make them into kind of a top team? I don't quite know. As you say, there's a lot of moving pieces. How do you fit them all together? How do you balance them all? We know that Simeone isn't necessarily the most. He likes to have a balanced attack. He likes to have a big centre forward. He likes to have somebody that plays off them, and he likes to have a bit of width out wide as well. So yeah, fitting that all together and making it all work is going to be a challenge for Simeone. I think Atleti are going in the right direction, but they're not at their destination yet, which is fair enough. We know they're behind Barcelona and Real Madrid as a starting point anyway.
Yeah, I do think that that team, being the tons of fun that it is, they could they could have some fun in Europe. They've had some, let's say, down seasons in Europe in the last few years, and I think they could add a bit of fun in that league phase where I think that kind of team in a one-off, just 90 minutes, who knows what's going to happen, could be a ton of fun. Now, Athletic Club, the reason why I think Athletic Club, I think they would be my pick for fourth, as boring that is because all they did was add the right back in Jesus Arezzo from Osasuna, and they added winger and former La Masia player in Robert Navarro from Mallorca on a free. While signing, this is the biggest thing they signed Nico Williams to a huge renewal and put all that stuff to bed. And in terms of Athletic Club, and obviously their BAS policy is well documented, in terms of Athletic Club, that's actually a great offseason. They didn't really lose anybody, and they took a fourth place side and they just improved upon it. Now, the one argument I think that you can make for Real Betis against Athletic Club is that Athletic Club now have to deal with Europe. And they were a top four side last season, so now they've got to play in the Champions League. And again, a team that is limited in their depth options because of the BAS policy. Europe might overextend them a little bit. And I guess my leading question here is that your assumption? Because I don't see Athletic Club as in a better side. It's just they're not probably deep enough to play in Europe, and that's probably going to hurt them.
Yeah, I mean, they were in the Europa League, of course, last season. I think
True.
I showed my hand a little bit earlier on because my kind of logic at this slightly comes at it from an Ernesto Valverde angle because Valverde's done a brilliant job. I mean, nobody could have imagined they'd win the Copa del Rey, ending a 40-year drought. Nobody could imagine getting into the Champions League, getting to European semi-final. All of these things are brilliant, but how many managers again kind of make it to that fourth year and continue, not just in Valverde's case doing well, but on a solid upward trajectory all the way through those 4 years. That's hard going, I think, and I think the excitement of the Champions League will give them a boost early on in that season. But that once that excitement goes off, I mean, maybe they make it to the round of 16 quarterfinals. I mean, I'd love them to make a run further, but eventually they are probably going to go out of Europe around February time, March time. So once that kind of excitement kind of wears off, then you're asking quite a lot of Athletic Club to kind of go back to the routine. We've seen that with teams in the past. We saw it with Athletic after their Europa League kind of run. They struggled a little bit in that second half of the season. I also think that the issues that plagued them 2 seasons ago, that stopped them getting to top four 2 seasons ago, was goal scoring. And Guruzeta was dropped for Sanadi quite a lot last season. Both kind of good players in their own right, but Athletic need at least kind of 15 goals from one of them, I think, to make the top four this season. And the other person who makes up for that, who kind of builds up that shortfall, is Oyan Sanset. And Sanset has just been ruled out until mid-September. The second half of last season, he was struggling with injury, inconsistency. He was dropped out of the team for a while for seemingly off the pitch stuff. We don't quite know what that was. They've done a good job of keeping it in house, but yeah, they basically need Sanset to take that next step. Nico Williams to kind of continue improving. And there's also kind of a bunch of older players that are also struggling. I mean, well, not struggling, but they need the same production from Iñaki Williams being one. He's now into his 30s. Yuri is now 35, 36, and they don't have a good alternative at left back. Inigo Ruiz de Galarreta is quite key for them in midfield as well. And my final point on Athletic, my arguments for as to why they might drop a singular place again, I'll give myself a tunnel to dig myself out of the hole with, because I think it will be tight like the title race. But they do have Yeray Alvarez suspended for the moment for a doping offence. He's fighting his case. We don't know what happened, but he's suspended until further notice, essentially. And that leaves them with just two centre-backs fit at this point in time, which is, as you say, worrying if you're in Europe.
Yeah, now the other wrinkle I would add is the Nico Williams factor, that for all of the push for Barcelona and everything over the summer, is that in 45 appearances last year across all competitions, he scored just 11 goals and 7 assists. Again, that's 3,000 minutes plus and 11 goals and 7 assists, 18 total goal contributions. To me, that can't be that low. You almost need a bounce back season. I say that for a young player, but it almost needs to be a bounce back season for Nico Williams. And next season, if he winds up getting 20 and 15, then we're probably talking about Athletic Club as the fourth place side in the Liga. Now, the other one that I want to add here is Villarreal to this little equation here. They lost Baena and they lost their center forward Mbari, but they bought Tejan Buchanan permanently. Man, a lot of former MLS players we're talking about here. The center back in Santiago Moreno from Atleti, and Las Palmas, this is their big one. Las Palmas' duel in Alberto Melero is now going to be like for like trying to place Baena. And they also got Thomas Partey on a free from Arsenal, which I have to mention, it's a big name. It's a big signing for them. But boo, boo, boo that man, of course, I think across the ground. We'll see if the fans in the Liga decide to boo him the way I'd like them to. But Villarreal, it seems like, yes, they lost Baena. So you think that the replacement, the like-for-like Molero for Baena, why are you not totally sold on Villarreal here?
I just think I'll be honest, I was slightly disappointed with Villarreal last season. I thought Marcelino would get a more consistent side out of them. I thought that without Europe, they should have been in that top four conversation. They obviously got into the Champions League eventually through the coefficient, but I thought that they should have been doing more with what they had last season. Now they will have Europe to contend with as well. That's another 8 games at the top level. You look at kind of Molero. Molero is a brilliant signing to replace Baena with. I think he's the most logical addition you could have found in La Liga to replace Baena with. But he's still not Alex Baena yet. I mean, Baena, we're talking one of the top 5 playmakers in La Liga. So Molero, you're asking for a huge amount for him to step up and kind of fill those boots. Cambuala is out for 4 months, one of their central defenders. Logan Costa, who was kind of their only reliable centre half last year, is out for, well, ACL probably most of the season, if not all. I think Rafa Marin and Santiago Mourinho have come in the centre backs. They're both good prospects. They're both good players as well, but they've also come from, in Marin's place, a year not playing at Napoli. Where he kind of really stood out was Alaves. In Mourinho's case, a year standing out at Alaves as well. It's not the same playing for Alaves as it is for Villarreal. You're asked to do so much more. You're asked to defend so much more space. So I think that is a problem. Although say that. Mourinho has been getting very positive reports in pre-season, playing at right back, interestingly. But yeah, I just think this Villarreal side hasn't necessarily addressed its issues that it had last season, and Partey on the pitch probably does improve them a little bit in midfield. But yeah, we don't know if after September he'll be out of prison. So yeah, there's that to factor into it as well.
Well, I was going to say that it was a bit of a shock for me to hear Real Betis as your fourth place team. And then I realized that I knew some of the names, but I didn't put them all together in conjunction. So you would have to have been watching a bit of some other leagues to see some of the best that Real Betis brought in. Because, yeah, interestingly enough, some of their big talents, they seem to be the only side in Liga who brought in from other leagues at a high clip. They've got Valentin Gomez, a young center back that I probably one of the the second biggest signing of the offseason coming in from Argentina. They got Alvaro Valles from Las Palmas on a free transfer. It was finally time for his contract to be up, so he comes on the free. Nathan from Napoli, that's made permanent. You have Junior Firpo coming back to the Liga. Again, Barca fans know him well on a free transfer from from Leeds United, I should say. And then you have Nelson Dioso from Monterrey in Liga MX, which is a pretty decent signing. And then their big name that Real Betis added was Rodrigo Riquelme, the left winger, but kind of can play all across the top there from Atletico Madrid. And yeah, in totality, now thinking about it, that's actually a pretty good offseason. They kept Lo Celso, who's not healthy. They kept Isco, who is not healthy and not going to be back until at least November. So we'll see when the 33-year-old can return. And then Abde, also a former Barcelona player, not healthy. But you keep everybody else. You have Diego Llorente, you have Marc Bartra, you've kept your center back core. You've Ricardo Rodriguez is still around, Hector Bellerin, and the like. And then, yeah, your man in charge. He may be 71 years young, but Manuel Pellegrini still has some ideas. And I think he is still one of those managers that does not get enough credit for adapting, right? We said, 3-4 years ago, Real Betis could not keep the goal out of the back of the net. And the last season and a half, they have kind of battened down the hatches, and they've been much more defensively sound. And I think to that point, I'm kind of going back on what I know about Real Betis, and that's saying, hey, they're, it's Betis under Pellegrini. They're going to go crazy. They're going to have all these shootouts, but that might not necessarily be the case with the lineup they have this season. And I don't know. I think you can easily convince me that Real Betis is now fourth based on the arguments we've made about the other two.
Yeah, I think bearing in mind I am arguing my points as well, but with an agenda in mind of hopefully being right about them. But I think with Betis, I will say I did settle on this kind of prediction before Isco went down for 3-4 months. That is quite a huge blow, but should be remembered that he was out for the first half of last season as well, and that's when they really kind of started picking up again. I do have a lot of hopes placed on Deosa. They need him to essentially replace Johnny Cardoso in the middle, and they need him to be solid and serviceable in there. But outside of that, like you say, I think it's a pretty solid window. I probably want them to sign a right back before the window ends as well, relying on Ruri Barlow and Hector Bellerin is a bit of a playing with the devil a little bit there. But Firpo, last season, the left back position was an absolute sieve for Betis. They just couldn't stop attacks going down that side. So Firpo is not perfect, but he is an improvement. Similarly with Adriana in goal, Adriana at this age just wasn't doing it. He shouldn't have been playing a Conference League final last season. And so yeah, I think having Valles in there should make a difference, although he's obviously been out for the last year, 18 months he's not been playing at Las Palmas, so that's also a factor. But yeah, generally I think they've kept most of what they had going last season together. Can they get Anthony in? That's the big question mark as well. I think with Isco out, they might try and bring him in. Maybe they can do some salary cap stuff with that as well. But yes, I think Betis have kept it together. The second half of the season, they were the best team of those three that we've just talked about for the top four. And finally, Cucho Hernandez, who came in last season, did okay when he came in, played quite well, played better than his kind of production on paper looked. I expect him to take a step forward and really become kind of a problem for La Liga defenses this season. So yeah, I think Betis just have good continuity and they're on an upward trajectory.
Cujo Hernandez from Columbus Crew. Got a lot of MLS overlap in that Real Betis team, or at least in the conversations we're having in the top six potentially of the Liga table. Now we've been talking transfers, and so the Liga and the transfers that they've lost this season. We've seen some of the big names go: Zubimendi to Arsenal, Christian Mosquera from Valencia also to Arsenal, Strand Larson to Wolves, Jesus Rodriguez to Como, Rodrigo de Paul headed to Inter Miami, Samuel Lino to Flamengo, Yedek from Valencia to PSV. But you know what? I'm actually going to stop the transfers there and listing because those are some names. But this offseason feels to me a lot different from the last three in terms of sales away from the Liga. The irony is, especially talking about Real Betis in particular, registering players is still a major problem. So at this point, where we stand on August the 15th, then the day that Liga begins, could things get a lot worse for Real Madrid? I mean, Real Madrid, for they're likely just going to be losing Rodrigo. But could things get a lot worse for La Liga teams before this transfer window is over and we see a bigger exodus of some of these top names? Or, is this the worst of it and La Liga teams are going to figure it out in terms of registering?
I'd say that most teams probably have already done the business that they want to do in terms of sales. I mean, you could maybe look at Sevilla and say Loic Bade is probably going to go. I assume Luca Bacchio could go as well. We'll come on to Sevilla in a little bit, maybe, but yeah, I think most of these teams have done that business. You look at Betis, Jesus Rodriguez is gone. Celta, Fer Lopez was their kind of big sale. Most of these teams, I mean, Villarreal, Tierno Barry as well. Athletic are the one that have managed to maintain their squad, as you say, but a lot of these sides have already kind of committed their big sale. And even if there are kind of registration issues, that I sort of feel like most of the business is done. I don't know. There might be a few surprises out there, but I think in terms of kind of young players that teams are willing to part with, it's already done. And so unless, like you say, things get really, really nitty gritty towards the end of the transfer window, I don't necessarily see too much coming off the board for La Liga. And I think with the salary limit, one of the things that you kind of see, well, we're increasingly seeing, is that even if the salary limit kind of limits the business that people can do, we are seeing a lot more continuity and kind of more settled squads, I think, because doing that kind of level of business, doing the kind of 8, 9, 10 people in, as Atleti have done, is quite hard if you've got a salary limit and to kind of shift that amount of money around. So yeah, I think we are seeing more settled teams and teams that have had to plan further ahead in advance in order to avoid problems with it.
You mentioned Celta there. Celta, little interesting. They brought in Radu as the goalkeeper. They brought in Zaragoza, who came back from Bayern Munich and really struggled for Osasuna last season when he did return. And Ferran Jukla, a lot of Barcelona connections. He is back in the Liga and at 26 now looks a different player coming in from I believe Club Rouge in Belgium. And then Borja Iglesias also becomes permanent. Iras Mariba also becomes permanent. So Celta de Vigo went out and they got their business done. And the big sales, though, was, of course, Fer Lopez to Wolves and Strand Larson also to Wolves. But Celta de Vigo, I think if we're talking about that, not top six team, but kind of pushing in, I think Celta might be a little bit of a darling of the Liga this season, the way that I don't want to compare them to Girona 2 seasons ago when they finished 10th, but I kind of feel that vibe that Celta they might have a surprise, but I don't know. We don't have to go long on Celta at all. I like some of the business they did, and sometimes the best thing to do is just to batten down the hatches and to have a successful season and go at it with the same crew and just take care of business of everybody.
Yeah, absolutely. And I think Celta, the one question mark is how they kind of handle the European side of it. I mean, you've got a young manager in Claudio Giraldez who's done one of the jobs of the season last year in terms of what he managed to do with the South side qualifying them for the Europa League. But how does he handle the kind of lack of time to work with his players? How do they handle the travel, the squad depth? But in terms of that depth, I do like what they've done. Zaragoza, I think he had a couple of good months. I mean, obviously that Barcelona performance was the highlight of it, but he kind of struggled after his injury in about November time for Osasuna. So I think they'll try and give him a fresh start. Jutgla, I think, is the Alfon replacement. Alfon was the kind of forward that left them for Sevilla on a free. So I think he's their kind of replacement for that kind of player, and he does quite well. Borja Iglesias was excellent again. He kind of had a real kind of rolling back the year season last year. And Elisha as well. I was really impressed with Elisha at times. Still inconsistent, but there's games when I remember watching him at the Bernabeu last season, and he was
Yeah.
problematically for Real Madrid, mopping up half of the Real Madrid midfield. So yes, Elisha, I think if you can get the best out of him, he's still only 22, Elisha. If you can get the best out of him, that's a huge signing as well. And I think, yeah, Celta have done good business. It's a young team, so they're still improving. They've still got a lot of room to kind of grow. Looks like they might just keep hold of Mingueza as well. So yeah, I think very positive somewhere if you're a Celta fan.
Yeah. All right. Let's talk bottom of the table now. Leganes, Las Palmas, and Real Valladolid, just to remind you, are gone. They're down in the second division. Levante, Elche, and Real Oviedo, the third one being the big surprise there, are up. That is Sidlo's squad, and I think that is how they're going to be characterized all throughout English media, that Sidlo is going to be the most biased he has been in forever. Actually, I've been reading his work for 25 years now, and it's he's always been able to be pretty. Even though he worked for Real Madrid TV, he's always been as unbiased as possible. But that is thrown out the window now with Real Oviedo, a club that he does have some of a ownership, literally an ownership stake in. So the question we're asking here is who will be relegated? And you and I were talking about before this. I have 5 teams, and you've got like a few other options, but I've got Levante and Alaves. To me, I think are going to be in that fight for survival. But I've got reasons for Elche, Real Oviedo, unfortunately, and Espanyol as the 3 to go down for me. Elche just added Federico Redondo from Inter Miami, who is a Twitter darling now 2 years ago in Argentina, but he just has not gone his way in the MLS for Inter Miami. So for him to be the big signing for Elche, they'll also be relying a lot on Alvaro Rodriguez coming over to be their striker from Real Madrid. But again, I can't look at their squad and believe they're staying up. That said, I've been doing the show long enough that Elche has proved me wrong on 3 occasions, I think they have before. And so I've gotten it wrong because I think every single year that Elche has been in the first division since I've had the show, I've said they're going down, and they don't go down every year. So Elche, I'm so sorry again. I think you're going right back down. I'm not. I have to be consistent. And again, I'm sorry about the hate I might get from the 1.5 Elche fans who might accidentally stumble upon this. But and then Real Oviedo, Asturias needs some La Liga representation. That is true. As Sporting Gijón, who are historically, people always forget this, but Real Zaragoza and Sporting Gijón throughout so much of the 20th century, you could just put them in a Liga, you know they were going to be there and stay up. But Sporting Gijón and Real Zaragoza are, I'd say, the 2 biggest clubs in Spain who are just not in a Liga and can't sniff the top division for most of the 21st century. And Real Oviedo, they get there over Sporting Gijón, which is bragging rights enough for this century, of course. But they're also going to need some of that Asturian magic to stay up. Or I should say, when I say Asturian magic, they're going to need some 40-year-old Santi Cazorla magic, because even I don't know how much we're going to see from him, but boy, is that an awesome story. That's so cool to see Santi Cazorla, even at 40, back in the Liga. Unless there's a big name coming, which I don't think there will be. There might be some last minute loans coming in for Real Oviedo, but I just don't, looking at their squad, I don't know how they score enough goals or keep enough goals out of the net to stay up. Their number 9, Federico Vianas, came back from an Achilles tear last season to score 1 goal, and that is their number 9. Solomon Rondon is 35 years old, and I don't really feel like their other forwards are top division forwards. I think they look like second division forwards. Now, Luka Ilic is the big pickup from Red Star Belgrade, but he'll basically have to do what Viana was at Villarreal, plus more last season, if Oviedo is going to have a chance of survival. And then my last club that I'm saying is going down is Espanyol, because I mean, it's fair for me to say Espanyol. While Levante don't have at this moment anybody registered, so they cannot play matches, they will get them registered. But I just don't see how Espanyol without Juan Garcia are. I just find they're on borrowed time now without him. That said, and if you could bring in Levante and Alaves into this argument, it's very fair because Javi Puado might be the best player I've named so far of all these teams facing relegation. But they're also, that being Espanyol, asking a lot of Tyrese Dolan, who is a new signing from the Championship in the UK. And if he hits, then yeah, Espanyol can stay up. Because yeah, those 2 might be the 2 best attackers of all the names that I just mentioned here, with all these other teams fighting relegation, including Levante and Alaves. So the bottom, the race to the bottom, Ruri, I've given you a lot of room. So yeah, surprise us. Is there another name that you're throwing into that, or do you agree with some of my reasonings?
I don't know if it's blind faith if I've been drawn into the story. I was at kind of an Oviedo event in Madrid recently enough, and I was kind of speaking to Martin Pelaez, the president. I don't know if I've just been drawn into it, but I have some sort of weird faith that Oviedo are staying up. I think if you look
No,
at the
let's do it. Let's
history,
do it. Let's do it. Up the Oviedo. Let's do it. Let's do it. No, we're fine. I'm fine. I hope they stay up too. I totally agree with you. It's the same thing with like Girona might be owned by Man City, but there's something fun about Girona. There's something fun about having another Catalan team. And to me, the regions of Spain, like they're so different. It's like you Celta de Vigo can't go down until Depor or La Coruña is coming back up. Like you need some representation from Galicia. You need some Asturian representation, right? You can't have 100 clubs out of the capital. I'm not just saying about Real Madrid. Like, I'd love if they went down, great, but like I'm saying that it can't all just be Madrid-based sides. You need some other energy from the rest of Spain. 100%, I agree.
yeah, I think, yeah, I don't know quite what it is, and weirdly, I think the two reasons that I think Levante or Elche could stay up are mainly their managers, whereas with Oviedo, I think I'd say Veljko Paunovic is one of the most likely to get sacked in the next kind of 6 months because I mean he only came in towards the end of it and he kind of got them up, got them through the playoffs, but yes, he doesn't have kind of a long track record in La Liga either. I think with Oviedo, I think they'll be riding the crest of that wave. I think that's quite important. The fact that Santi Cazorla is there, obviously. It would be good if they could NFL style just stick Santi Cazorla on for every set piece.
Right?
If he could just curl in every set piece, I think they would actually be really, really good. But yeah, 20 minutes of Cazorla magic at the end. Rondon, I think I think he can still do a job. I mean, watching him at the Club World Cup, he's still very big. He's not lost that. And he's still a bit of a handful. So I think there is a chance Oviedo stay up. Maybe that's kind of blind faith for me. My I actually quite like Espanyol's window. I think they've done quite a good job. Roberto Fernandez, when he came in last season, I thought they took a step up and looked a bit of a different side. Whereas even with Joan Garcia's heroics last season, before January, February, they really looked like they were going down. So yeah, I think keeping Puado, adding Fernandez, those are two good additions. I think they've got Terraz in as well, who's a player that I've always quite liked. He's always kind of turned up with goals here or there whenever he's been on the pitch. So yeah, I think Espanyol have done enough of a kind of rounded business to look at the other squads that they're compared with, Elche, Levante, and Oviedo or Alaves. This is how deep into the La Liga Mire I am. I thought Alaves going down was a bit of a hot take, like because they were about sixth to go down in terms of the odds or something. But yes, I think Alaves have not replaced the goals that they have. One of those sources of goals was Kike Garcia, who has gone to Espanyol. So that's quite a big pickup, I think, for Espanyol as well. They've got two strikers now who I think can do it in La Liga. Whereas Alaves have sold Panicelli for 16.5 million, good deal to Strasbourg. But between him and Kike Garcia going, Abdelaktar as well, who was one of their key defenders, has gone to Getafe. So yeah, Alaves are missing a few too many for. I predict them to go down. They're probably going to be there with Elche and Levante for me. I think Elche, I was looking at that. I really expected them to do more business, like you say. Redondo has just come in, but I expected Elche to kind of move things about a little bit more. They're really relying on Eder Sarabia to pull out some magic, and maybe he does do that. I mean, we saw that with Garcia Pimienta, a squad that wasn't necessarily La Liga ready in many senses when he got Las Palmas up, but kind of aggressive or ambitious style kept them up. Hopefully Sarabia can do the same with Elche, but they also sold Nicolas Fernandez Marcao and Nicolas Castro as well, who were two of their kind of better creative players. So for me, there's a bit of a deficit with Elche. And looking towards Levante, I love the Comandante Morales, who's back in La Liga at the age of 38. He's come back all the way up as well, but I just think they're lacking a few goals. I mean, Morales got 11 goals last season, and if he makes double figures in La Liga, he is truly doesn't age. But yes, I think Morales outside of that, Roger was their best scorer with 11 goals as well. Leganés are the perfect example. You can get up to Segunda with players kind of chipping in with goals here and there, but you need an actual goal scorer, I think, to stay up in La Liga, and that's well, it really helps if you have one at the very least. But Levante don't have that right now, so yeah, I think Levante, Elche, and Alaves are my favourites to go down.
You said the name Eder, and for maybe new Kool-Aids might not know, but back there was a time when Barcelona were in crisis, as I know it feels like they're always in crisis, but no, they were like truly in crisis. And there was a manager named Quique Setién in charge of Barcelona, and he had a lead
A long
assistant
time
named,
ago.
and he had a lead assistant named Eder Sarabia, who was again the lead assistant for Quique Setién. Then he winds up helping to lead Andorra to the second division, and now he continues to get the bumps up, and now he's Elche's manager. So Eder Sarabia, at just 44 years old, is one of the more exciting young managers in the Liga. So yeah, maybe Eder Sarabia can do a job, but I think this is not a safe place for him. I mean, not necessarily me. I mean, whatever, Eder Sarabia, that would pass. But for a lot of Culés, they do not think of the Quique Setién and Eder Sarabia era as. I think, to me, that era can be summed up as broken promises. Like I think there was a lot of promise of ideas, and those two injecting it, and then you went, wait a second, these ideas are not working. This is not going well. And so I think there's a lack of belief in Sarabia from a lot of the Barcelona supporters. All right, before I let you go, last big question. I didn't get you prepared for this, but if you have one big surprise, one hot take, one thing that we were not anticipating from the Liga this season, which I think can be summed up with three favorite transfers in the Liga this season. So your top three favorite La Liga transfers for this coming seasons. And I think that is incorporated with a surprise. But I also give you the option, too. If you're just saying, hey, I think Ines Moriba is going to be a player of the season at Celta de Vigo, that also fits. I don't want to just limit you to transfers here. So, yeah, give us your surprises and give us the things you're most excited about in the Liga this season.
My one big surprise, which I discovered wasn't as much as a surprise as I thought, because a lot of people, well, not a lot, but some people have also tipped them to do quite well, was Valencia to compete for Europe. I mean, Valencia have been, as we've discussed, I think, in the past, on a slow journey into hell over the last 5-6 years. But they've had a summer this year that actually looks like you can see logic and thinking in it beyond just selling the best young players they have. I mean, like you say, Mosquera and Yarek have gone, but they managed to keep Javi Guerra, Cesar Tarrega's stayed as well, Diego Lopez is renewed. So I like all of those deals. If you want a wild card signing for someone that could do really well, but I don't necessarily have that much faith in, but if it clicks, if it happens, if the touch paper is lit, then Arnaut Danjuma, if he returns to his kind of former glories, then he could really kind of take this Valencia side to a new level. And Carlos Corberán is the biggest kind of reason behind that surprise. I mean, Corberán, second half of the season last year, Valencia were good enough for Europe, so that just shows you how well he was doing with that side. So, yeah, they're missing a few pieces, but I don't think Copete, who came in as the centre-back, I think he can replicate what Mosquera and Yarek were giving them last season. So, yeah, I like what Valencia have done there. My kind of surprise team, I think, this season to be kind of 7th, 8th, 9th, that kind of range. Signings, it's very hard. I'm sort of tempted just to annihilate the big two from this, because I could quite easily argue Juan Garcia. You pick up the best goalkeeper in La Liga for 25 million, who's 23 years old. That makes you a candidate for signing in the summer, in my view.
Yep.
And similarly, Dean Housen, I think. I mean, Housen, I think, will change the face of that Real Madrid side. You looked at that PSG game in the Club World Cup where Raul Asensio and Rudiger both kind of just essentially gave the ball to PSG through on goal, and that's not going to happen with Housen. Housen is a completely different defender, and he'll give them a calmness and something they've not had at that position, maybe since Ramos, like you said. So I mean, you could argue those two amongst them. My absolute favourite signing of the summer is Alex Baena. I just think him at Leti, that kind of nippy, charged, kind of attacking player is exactly what Diego Simeone wants. I think he's exactly what Griezmann perhaps was back in the day. He has an element of the Diego Costa about him, even if he's not the kind of same kind of player or physicality. So yeah, that's my absolute favourite. If you want to go beyond that and delve kind of deeper into the division, Luis Felipe on a free centre-back who moved to Saudi Arabia for, I think it was about 23 million from Betis 2 seasons ago, has come back to Rayo for free. I think that's an absolute genius signing, and I don't quite know how they pulled that off, but I think he's a brilliant signing. And I think the other one for me probably is Brian Zaragoza. I think even if he struggled at Osasuna last year, you can see the talent is there if you can get the best out of him. And especially 2 seasons ago, last season in November, he was in the Spain side. So Celta signing a Spain winger on a permanent deal at the age of 23, 24 is pretty big business for them, in my view. So yeah, those would be my 3 fun ones outside of the big two. Baena, Luis Felipe and Brian Zaragoza.
Yeah, Celta's fun because remember, Celta now in Europe, just what 2.5 seasons ago, they were fighting in relegation. Like it was close. Like it was Iago Aspas is too old, and Celta de Vigo are going down, and now look at them. And yeah, that's a good story. We haven't really mentioned too much Mallorca, but Mallorca, in less than 27 hours, Barcelona will be kicking off their season. Will Rashford be registered? That is still out of time recording, up in the air. But Juan Garcia, because of Ter Stegen finally putting pen to paper, Juan Garcia will be registered. That's 100%. And it sounds like the latest reports are that Laporta and the board are going to wait to give that personal guarantee to make up for the VIP seats until the transfer window is nearing the end, which could mean that Rashford would be out until September, but you'd expect by the beginning of September, even if it takes a personal commitment, financial commitment from the board, that Rashford will be registered. Ultimately, which, if you remember going back, that's also what was able to get Danny Olmo over the line as well. The other good news is because of Ter Stegen's case being the way it is, Juan Garcia will not have to be re-registered in January, so we won't have to do this again, at least for him. And again, for the rest of
Touch wood. I never have any faith for Barcelona these days.
yeah, and unfortunately, yeah, we are kind of out of time. But Rory, before you go, I usually give you a chance to talk about Football España, but you've already mentioned the preview has to be read, and I've already told people to go over there. So I'm gonna actually cut into that time and just ask you, as a unbiased, like this is not a Barcelona perspective, this is not a a another or anti-Barcelona perspective from you. It's an unbiased perspective when it comes to all the registration stuff and you're trying to write about it and make sense of it. Like I think you do a wonderful job reading your stuff of just making it seem so matter of fact and not like, oh, Tebas is trying to do this and da 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 da. So what is your approach to understanding this whole, and I think it really is a league wide mess about registrations in the Liga, not only this season but the last few years?
Yeah, it's quite a difficult issue because there's so many caveats and the rules have changed so many times now with percentages of what you can use, what you can do in terms of what these teams are carrying over from the COVID era as well. That's going to end, I think, in the next year or two, but that's still having quite a big impact on the budgets of these clubs. So it's hard to wade through. I think the thought process behind Tebas's idea is correct in the sense that you don't want clubs going bust. Above all, I would rather La Liga struggled a little bit more for quality than I saw a Depor and Oviedo, one of these teams that mean so much to their community, as we've just said, go bust. I think his idea or his thinking was that he's also betting on the Premier League bubble bursting and other teams in other leagues, kind of Bundesliga, Serie A, them struggling a little bit more and perhaps having to bring in these rules themselves. I think he was trying to get ahead of the game in that regard. Has it hurt La Liga's capacity to compete? Of course. Does it make it difficult for these sides that, especially kind of your Mallorcas, your Osasunas, who've now had stability, been in La Liga for a long time, to compete because they're essentially relying on match day income for the vast majority of their funds as well. So I think it's hard. What the solution would be if you want to keep the system in place and keep it how it is that you probably need to have a better share of the TV rights. Are Barcelona and Real Madrid going to do that? Probably not. On the flip side, I think if you loosen this, you open it up to more investment, you could see some more fun cases. For example, your Malagas of the world that kind of really challenged for a while. But Malaga also spent quite a long time in the third division quite recently. So I think it's a rule, it's a system that works well for clubs that aren't in the top four because those clubs in the top four are just trying to invest and just trying to get better. But also, I think if you look at it from a Barcelona perspective as well, if Laporta didn't have any restrictions, if he didn't have anything holding him back, just exactly how much of Barcelona's debt would he have racked up by this point? I think for Barcelona, they've obviously struggled with it at times, but they've still won two leagues in the last 3 years. They've been through a period of pain, and I think they'll come out the other side of this in better shape than they would have done had La Liga not had this system in place.
Yeah, it is and this is, I have a piece coming out in a few weeks' time, again, kind of reinstituting that when you talk about Barcelona, again, we don't have time for this conversation, but mafia out of necessity. There was a generation ready to go that is even more somehow exceptional than what I was calling for a few seasons prior to, when I was like, hey, there are 14, 15, 16-year-olds who are just very special. Please trust me. And that group is, I mean, you couldn't have imagined what Lamine Yamal was going to be. Like I've said it. He was the best 12-year-old I've ever seen, which is a weird sentence to say, but he was. He was the best 12-year-old I've ever seen. But for him to be the best 17-year-old I've ever seen, it's just these are different
And
plateaus. These are different levels.
arguably the best 17-year-old anyone's seen.
Exactly. Right, exactly. So yeah, it's just, and not just him, but again, if it wasn't Lamine Yamal, like Tony Fernandez wouldn't be Lamine Yamal, but Tony Fernandez is 17, and that kid is good. That kid is just good, and that's the whole thing about, yes, Laporta. If he had all this limitless money, would Tony Fernandez even sniff the first team ever, or would he just be sold for 15 mil next summer? It might happen anyway, but the point is, there might not be those chances for those kids. Would Joe Fernandez have been able to, set the preseason aflame if you're right? If Laporta had the room to fill out the 25 first team players that were eligible with the biggest names possible, many of which might not work out or be flops. Yeah, those are, again, hypotheticals we're talking about. And a reminder, too, that because Laporta is a politician, I think, again, another conversation you and I could have someday is, to your point about the ownership situations. Like, and I'll answer this one about Barcelona. It was this season. I saw a few takes. I think people are just, younger people particularly, are fed up. They're like, hey, I've been a fan of this club for 5 years, and why are we doing this registration thing every single year? Why can't a big Saudi Arabia fund come in for 48% or 49% of ownership of the club, and the socios keep the other 51%? And I say, absolutely not. Like, I would rather. I mean, Barcelona are dealing with these issues, and they made the semifinal of the Champions League, and they won the Liga. So no, that's my answer is devoutly no. That I still am a romantic. I love the club I do because of the soul of football, and I love so many of the Liga teams because of the soul of football. And the reason why I hope that Real Oviedo stays up is because they did go under. They did do what Malaga did. They did play with fire. Some new ownership said, we're going to come in and we're going to make it all better. Peter Kim at Valencia, they put investments in and they say, I'm bored with my new toy. And then they leave. And then the town, you're right. I mean, we say city, but these are small cities, depending on where you're used to cities, right? Like in comparison to some major cities in the US or Russia or in China or in India. Like, these are not major cities. Like, they're called towns, if anything. And some of these towns, I mean, yeah, and these football clubs are the lifeblood of those towns. And so to see them stripped for parts by these outside investors, it feels gross. I don't like it. And so, yeah, just continue on if Tebas has to hurt the league to keep the soul of the league intact. And I know, gosh, if he was better at PR and if he just wasn't Tebas, that's what, you know what I mean? You know what I'm saying? If he wasn't so much Javier Tebas and he just had a better presentation of the thing he was trying to do, yeah, I think it would be a lot more palatable than it is. But because of it's from the horse's mouth, it's tough. It's tough to go from Florentino Perez to Laporta and Tebas, and you're like, well, those are the guys that are giving us all the information that we need to get. So
Yes, I think the first thing I'd do in La Liga's marketing department was ban Tebas from Twitter. Just they don't need that. They do not need that.
No. But I would say that anybody who's not banned from Twitter, please, again, follow Ruri Barlow. Again, the Liga is more than just Barcelona and Real Madrid and Atletico Madrid. It is 20 teams, and if you want the best coverage out there, it's Football España. So, Ruri, I know you've got some work to do. We've got now 3 hours until the Liga begins. So, thanks for coming on, and happy Liga season.
Absolutely. Thank you so much, Dan. All the best.
All right. And thanks to everyone again who joined for this one. I will be back in your ears or on your screens in less than 30 hours for the watch along for Mallorca against Barcelona on bigup.com/Barcelona pod. I do have some exciting things planned for Big Up as well. And I also want to just take a quick moment here. I was going to say thank you so much for 30,000 subscribers on YouTube in the last 3 weeks. We skyrocketed from 25 to 30. And before I was able to congratulate everybody and say thank you, we hit 40. So that's kind of what just happens when you ride the wave. So thank you so much. 40, now it's time for 50, and I'm going to continue to get greedy. If people aren't happy when Barcelona win one trophy, they want to win all of them next season. And hey, that's how I'm going to be as well. So thank you so much to all the Kool-Aids that have hopped on board. I hope more and more continue to hop on board. And as always, until next time, sports bye.